oxygen levels, which I can monitor from my watch, would go way down.
Wow.
Yeah. Streaming.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
Yeah, she had COVID in the summer and still has a persistent cough.
Mm-hmm.
This thing is,
Months and months later, almost a year
Hmm.
later.
it looks different. Start virtual camera.
You're streaming.
Okay. Okay. The screen, it likes, there's been an update to the software down here and it looks very different.
All these logos updates.
Yeah, cause if the church, I guess if the entire churches was updated for the streaming services there, then, okay. It is good to be back. I started thinking, well, there was one Sunday, Easter Sunday we missed, cause we were at Kara's church and then missed a COVID Sunday, and then missed another Sunday, so it feels really, 3 out of 4 Sundays we were kinda gone, and so it was weird. But Josh, thank you for teaching. I appreciate that very, very much. So let's, we'll wanna start with prayer, but that's kinda one of the things that's on my mind, is we have the bylaws meeting, after church, where they will be reviewed. We've done, the committee has worked and worked and worked, and we think they're not perfect, but they've been, kinda brought to the 21st century. And even if it's not perfect, one of the things we wrote in the bylaws is the bylaws have to be reviewed once a year. So we want it to be a document that, as things change, we put in a thing about what if we're required to go strictly virtual, something happens. How do you have meetings? What if you need a meeting where people need to vote? So, it's been interesting to work on that. So I pray that go well. I think it's gonna go just fine, but I still pray that it go well. So, Kendall, would you open us in prayer, please?
Sure. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for your constancy and your love and your power and the joy that you bring us all. Thank you for your guidance in our lives. Thank you for bringing together Christian people through the ages that endeavor to do their best to follow you and understand your guidance for them. Thank you for Tracy today and what she's prepared. And thank you for the renewed health that so many are experiencing today. Be with us. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen, and I'd like to officially welcome, our youngest member to our class, who had surgery and did not need to be left at home alone. So for y'all out there in, virtual land, we have got a gorgeous little kitten who is the love of Julie and well, especially the love of Julie's life, but I think Kendall is rather attached to her as well.
Yes, I am. Here we go. She wants to have her own camera moment.
Does she wanna have her own camera moment?
Here we go.
Oh, look at her.
Look,
Oh
here's
my
her,
goodness.
here's her own camera moment.
Oh, look at, oh, that's coming out well.
She's good.
Serendipity.
Serendipity do, like as in Scooby-Doo.
So what are y'all calling her? That's a mouthful.
Sometimes I call her Dippity-Doo.
Dippity doo, yeah, I was betting
If
that
your
you.
kid doesn't have like, or your pets don't have like 4 different names, are you really petting? I mean,
I usually call her Serendipity. She usually calls her Dippity-Doo. But the prior cat that passed away was named Cindy Lou Who with a very pink nose. So we tend to add a lot of names to our animals.
But they know they're loved. So welcome, Serendipity Doo. Y'all, of course, we're all out of whack with where we are. But we're in John 15 today. And we're gonna look at remain in me, when Jesus talked about that. Now, how many of in here like gardening? You know, flower and gardening and some do it just,
I like it, but I'm not that good at it.
okay.
I do it out of peer pressure.
We don't
You
have
do
to
it out
send
of peer
me.
pressure.
I love it.
Because if everybody else had, concrete poured all the way up to the house and that was just it, I'd do the same thing.
Well, Fred would join you and help with the concrete
if we
pouring.
could get away with fake grass, we would do it.
I'd rather work in my shed.
My brother has fake grass and it looks like real grass.
Right? Just saying.
Yeah, some of it's
We
really
were
good.
outside working, well, I
I've
was
done
outside working last Saturday, and Fred was holding the bag because I was doing some pruning. And, so a couple of people walked by there's a loop that people walk, with a brick thing and where they walk their dogs. And, two different people will come by and comment on our yard, and it's such an ego thing for me. I will just, looks really good. Then one lady said, I noticed you took up all your roses and put down new ones. And I thought, they are looking at the yard because we did. I will explain what was wrong with the rose later in a slide. But pruners, clippers, we do that. Now, in Maryland, these need pruning in the spring, okay? So first picture is, what are those?
Flowers.
That's what I was
Flowers.
gonna say.
Mums, chrysanthemums. You actually prune them twice. You prune them in the spring, and then you prune them about second week in July, so then they will bloom back out in the fall and look, really showy. These are, and y'all together, Josh
Black-eyed
is
Yellow flowers.
The
This
brown
is-
center.
black-eyed Susans.
That's what I said.
Yes, she had that one. You got it right. Points for you.
Orange seeds.
And Thea, you know that one.
It's a fuchsia.
Fuchsia.
Wow.
So these three things need to be pruned in the spring.
Those look like little fairies, like are sitting there with their
Yeah.
wings and their little feet dangling
Oh,
down.
they
do.
don't they?
Fuchsia and bleeding hearts are like my two favorite flowers.
Knockout, and these are the flowers, knockout roses need to be pruned back in the spring. Now, why do we prune anything other than your neighbors might want you to prune your stuff?
That's the only reason I prune anything around the house.
For
That's the
new
only reason.
regrowth.
As far as plant vegetation goes.
As far as vegetation goes.
You want it to grow a certain way. You're trying to get a certain result that you appreciate.
Yeah, it's gonna be healthier if you prune. Our neighbors on one side, a number of years ago, had put in some knockout roses and on the side of their house, and they were just getting way too big and were not looking healthy. And so I was we're good friends, I was kinda nudging her, you might wanna think about cutting that back, pruning that back. How far, Tracy? You need to have about this much down left.
Wow.
Are you sure? I'm sure. Are you really sure? I'm sure. I thought if I'm wrong, I'll have to buy new roses. They look great. So pruning is important. Pruning is so important. We won't watch the whole video.
I'm 4.5 months postpartum.
Oh.
Right now, I'm definitely a little bit fuller than I used to be.
Let's go past that.
It's adjusting.
Make it louder.
Okay, you can go, we're not gonna watch him, but the point is, you write in Google search pruning and then put in the next word, whatever you have. There are a gazillion videos on that because it's so important, even if you hate it.
Josh, do you watch videos on it?
Pruning.
Huh?
Pruning?
Oh, no.
Pruning.
No.
We look at it and go, oh, we should cut that, and then
Yeah.
and then 3 weeks later we cut it.
If we remember to cut it. If we don't look at it in the summer and go, we should have cut that.
And sometimes we cut it when we're not supposed to cut it, and we say,
Yeah,
well.
it's not gonna flower this year.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Maybe next year.
And I'm like, okay, I'll prune it down, and if it doesn't go back, I'll just pull it and plant something else.
See, kindred
See, there you
spirits
go.
right here.
I love it, but I just do my own thing.
And I walk
I love
around with a
working
plastic bag and a cup with alcohol in it.
No, not,
Not to drink.
no.
Oh, I
I did not know where that was going.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
was I didn't
We
either.
obviously took that
It's
all
like, this
different.
is proud of you.
No, when you're.
look what we've been putting on the internet this morning.
Nice
how
bag
long
and a
his flowers
fine mug of scotch.
grow.
When you're, no, there's a reason, and I learned this because I was, when you're like deadheading knockout roses or cutting things off, because it's easy to carry particular diseases from one to the other, then you cut one, you stick it was a cup of rubbing alcohol, just to be clear. You stick your pruners down into the rubbing alcohol, you know, to make sure you're not carrying something from one plant to the other plant.
Phew, you're really into that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
I've never
Yeah,
done
that
that.
sounds like a lot of work.
I didn't know that you had to.
Tear the thing out of the ground and get another one.
It doesn't-
Well, I had to do that too on the other one. So anyway, look what Jesus says. I'm the true vine. What's the opposite of true?
False.
False. I'm not just one of the vines. I am the only vine. And I had never sat down on the word true, because I just kind of, whenever I read this, I just sort of zip right past. You know, I like to get to the word gardener because I like that. But he's not going to be false to us or tell us anything that's false. I'm the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. See, we can cut those off. Now, in some essence, there's a concept of judgment with that. You know, now, are they bearing no fruit as for believers? Are they really a believer and bearing no fruit? Or are they a believer and from a sin perspective, they're just not bearing no fruit? They may even be harming the cause of Christ. While every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. See, Jesus was a gardener, so that it will be even more fruitful. So what does he desire out of us? Fruitfulness. You know, look at the fruits of the Spirit. How many of, let's see if we can recall the fruit, depending on the translation you memorized in, fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness,
and self-control.
self-control. There may be another one in there, but
I think that's all of them.
anybody want to confess which fruit of the Spirit they are lacking in? Oh, mine is patience. Let's just be. When I was teaching school years ago at Christian school, I was doing a thing on fruits of the Spirit, and I had little fruits with the different ones on. And so I asked the kids if they had to identify one, what would be theirs, and they were fourth graders, and they said it was all patience. And so I made mine a bigger fruit, and I had patience on mine because I'm not good on that. Okay, now in Isaiah 5:2, I was looking at that because it's talking about pruning. We assume pruning is going to produce good things, you know, and we're assuming we did it right, and Jesus pruning is a good thing. But now this was looking at pruning for a negative thing that what was wanted to accomplish didn't. He dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it and cut out a wine press as well. I mean, this guy was ready for it. He was going to get some grapes out of this. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. You know, Scripture in total sometimes talks about pruning doesn't produce what they want. Isaiah said this all should happen, but it didn't happen. When Jesus prunes us, then his reason is easy. He wants us to be more fruitful. When I am pruning, when y'all are pruning, Josh is pruning a plant, can you mentally just hear it sort of screaming a little bit? You know, but ultimately,
Are you taking your meds?
yes.
Do they say anything else?
What would I call that? I'm trying to, what?
Hallucination.
the auditory variety.
Oh my goodness. You know, you don't teach for several weeks and you live hard, but
Well, they gave me a hard time last week, and so we talked about that, and now it's your turn.
it's not, that is not, but my point, pruning is painful, to us sometimes, you know. Now, you want to have your clippers sharp, because if they're not sharp, it really is painful to the plant, just saying. So, sometimes in the Old Testament, the idea of what you're wanting to do and build and expect, Israel thought, and I don't want to get into Isaiah and all the stuff with the Old Testament, but Israel thought they were God's chosen people, but they didn't live like it. And only bad fruit lived. And you know, I forget which one of the books we were studying, but they talked about the nation saw the bad fruit that Israel was displaying, and there was, I don't know, talking down about, well, you're supposed to follow the one true God, and look how y'all are living. Now, already clean. You're already clean because of the word, message of Jesus, I've spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Now look at this. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. That's not debatable. If you want to bear fruit, let's even refer to fruits in the Spirit, it's not a human thing that you can will yourself into. You've got, because we can have fruits, they could probably be pretty good fruit, but the fruits that Jesus desires us to have are only going to happen if you remain in Him. Okay, you will be like, and the next one goes on, no. You're going to be like this if you don't remain in me, a bunch of useless pieces of wood. So no branch can bear fruit by itself. You cut, I don't know what those things were pruned, all cut off, laying in a hood. There is generally nothing that's ever going to grow out of that pile of sticks because it's not attached to anything that's going to give it life or food or anything like that. Now, excuse me, the question is, how do we go about remaining in Him? I'm sorry, how do we remain in Him? What's the starting place of remaining in Him?
For me, it's prayer.
Back up even further. To be able to remain.
How do you get there in the
Salvation.
first place?
How do you get there in the first place? Salvation. So we start with, you can't remain in something
If you never got in.
if you never, if you never became a part of Him. So we don't, being a good person doesn't get us in Him. But often we talk to people and we hear but that's not what got us in. I love to update y'all on how our neighbors are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would pop down last week and to say hello. They had picked up, we had a delivery from Thea and Josh for Mother's Day, and it needed to be refrigerated, and so they wouldn't leave it. The delivery people would not leave it unless, okay. So I went down to get it. We were chatting, and she said, "Do you like coffee?" I said, "No, not really. I'm kind of She said, "I have got some Turkish coffee." She said, "and it's very expensive. Would you like to try it?" Well, I don't really. She said, "Oh, you're gonna love it." And I thought, that might be a cultural thing, that she is offering me something. She said, "We drink it very seldom because it's expensive." And I thought, I don't want to offend this person because it's I'd love to try it. I said, "Now don't get mad at me." if I don't like it. So she makes it, she uses this little thing, I don't know the names, cause I'm really not a coffee drinker.
A French press.
No,
No,
it's
it's
like its own little kind of carafe
Filter.
container
And
thing.
it's about this big.
Yeah.
And so she made it and she poured it into, it was a smaller cup, not, not a mug. And it looked almost black.
Yeah,
Like an espresso.
Pretty heavy.
Yeah,
It's-
it's
it's
a lot
heavy
like an
stuff.
espresso.
And she said, would you like some sugar? I thought, thank you, God. And she said, 1 or 2, would you want 3? Yes, yes. So she put 3, not whole, I guess there's a smaller appropriate spoon that you measure with. So she put 3 and I thought, well, that ratios should be pretty good. And I have to tell you, she stirred it up and then I let it cool a little bit. Cause if you don't drink hot stuff, drinking hot stuff, it'll kinda wake you up. It was pretty darn good. I was, and I'm so grateful that I liked it. I drank the whole cup. I came
Wow.
home and was kinda bad.
Got a lot done.
But
I
I,
stayed home.
yeah, but I just see all these little things. And I'm having fun with them. I'm enjoying them, enjoying their little guy. And I think perhaps Pastor Clarence and I have a little bit of a disagreement because not disagreement, but I think his method of sharing the gospel is much more maybe assertive, I don't know the right word.
Direct.
It's more direct.
There you go.
And I think you can't always be direct. You just kind of love them along the way. So I get so excited about being offered Turkish coffee that was in some respect he only works, she stays home. Could be a little bit of
A step toward, yeah.
a little bit of a sacrifice. I was gonna drink that stuff if it killed me, but it was actually pretty good. To remain in Him, to share the gospel, we gotta be abiding in Him. Now somebody said prayer. Yes.
Kendall and I were kind of talking about this in my job. I worked till midnight,
She did a 14-hour day on Friday.
and we did, had the coach buses out from the garage to the building that they're opening, and had a big party, and women in long dresses, men in tux, and people in full military outfits, and so we gave them rides. It wasn't far, but they were so appreciative that they didn't, have to worry about getting their heels stuck in stuff, and that, get sweaty or winded or whatever. So some of the drivers, they wanted to give you something, we're saying thank you, because they were so appreciative they didn't have to walk that distance. And I always take things when people give them to me because, it's what they want to say thank you. But other drivers said, no, thank you, I don't want that. But even if it's something I don't want, I want to take it from them because they want me to have it.
She's always driving people somewhere and they bring her commemorative coins or other
You're giving
souvenirs.
people an opportunity to say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's kind of hard for us to do that, but there's a good thing.
That's part of the relationship, though. It's
That's-
giving and taking of a relationship. Sometimes you're not being asked to give; you're being asked to take.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes
Yeah.
it's harder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's harder, to take. But yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a relationship. It's a relationship.
As soon as they get off the bus, I might throw it away, but they're not going to see me do that.
Right.
And
right.
I'm thankful that they're thankful for something that I could provide for them.
And I'm pretty sure she's kept everything so far.
Well, and you
Because we got 'em
respond
all.
in a gracious way.
Mm-hmm.
Would they remember someone who responded graciously as opposed to someone who didn't?
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I might prefer the gracious person driving me as opposed to the one who was dismissive.
Friday night, they had flowers on the table, and some of the ladies took them, and everybody got a mug of the evening, the opening of the building or whatever, and one lady offered one of the drivers a mug with the flowers in it, and she said, "No, thank you." And I'm like, "Why did you do that?"
It was just a thoughtful thing that they were doing for,
Yeah.
yeah. Not everybody understands that you build relationships with people, you know.
It's intentionality. It's,
And, yeah.
all of this is intentionality. You are intentionally trying to foster a relationship with your neighbor. You are intentionally worrying about how you are perceived by other people and your relationship with them.
Mhm.
All of that is intentional. You're intentionally taking time to pray. One of the best things that I've done for my relationship is prayer. I do it every single morning now. I was trying to figure out when I was going to fit it in, and instead of thinking of it like that, I was just like, no. When I arrive at work, whether from my motorcycle or I'm still sitting in my truck when it's cold, I sit there and I take time. And sometimes I'm just sitting there in silence. It's one of those trying to figure out what do you pray for and all that. But sometimes I've got a lot of things that I have to pray for. Sometimes I'm just like, what do you want me to do today? And trying to be receptive and intentionally taking the time to try to communicate and then to try to listen. I think that kind of gets to like the root of how do you remain.
Intentional in what we
Every
do.
time I take my bus out and I've got people on there, I circle the bus and I ask God for His protection for me and the passengers and the bus and their happiness, that we get along well, and if there's other drivers going with me and they're Christians, then we pray together. And especially when we went to New York, and that we come back in a better condition than we leave. And God's a hedge of protection around that bus, and I circle the bus, and sometimes I have my arm up as I pass by, and sometimes I call Katie and she prays with me because I'm scared I'm going to get lost, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to be able to find it, there's all kinds of, but every trip, every time is a
You were
prayer.
giving
You
me
couldn't start a better way. Yep.
cold chills
Mhm.
when you talk about that.
And then if the other drivers aren't praying with me, I'm praying for them too.
Intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I want to be on your bus.
Yeah, really.
It's a big responsibility driving a great big bus
Yeah,
full
it
of
is.
national treasures.
Yeah.
Especially in DC, and DC is getting crazier and
For the
crazier.
passengers all around, but for the,
The-
for
the
the people on, irreplaceable.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's irreplaceable at some level, but
Sign up for Julie's bus. You'll be prayed over before you get on. But that is, Julie, thanks for sharing that. Wow. Okay, we got a choice. Here's this choice, okay? I am the vine, you are the branches. Sometimes I think the word vine gets us, when I think of having a vine, I think of this little grapevine running along. I almost think about that as like the trunk, what's in the center, probably from my perspective. I am the vine, you are the branches. And if you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Okay. So if you do this, you're going to look like that. Okay? Of course, y'all know what those are. You know what those are?
Flowers.
Pink flowers.
Pink flower, knockout roses. I love knockout roses. So this is what you're going to look like. I had so much fun putting this
I bet
together.
you did.
Yeah. Because He wants us to look like that. He wants us to demonstrate that kind of fruit. I want my flowers to look like that, okay? But if we don't remain in Him, hey, you're not going to bear any fruit. Let me be very clear with you. is what he's telling us. Choice number one. Choice number two. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. This is a disease of knockout roses. It's called red rosette. There's no cure for it.
Oh, I've seen that before.
Yeah, this little witch's thing, it's
Yeah.
called a witch's broom coming up. It got in ours last year, and I didn't know what it was.
I know what it is, yeah.
So I looked it up before we started fooling with the yard, and I was able to diagnose, because they just look bad. And the unhappy thing was you can't cure it. There is nothing I could spray on it or put on it or anything. The only solution was, because the neighbor noticed, have them all dug up and all replanted.
So it's contagious from one plant to the next?
It's a mite
Oh.
that carries it
Okay.
inside the plant. And
So the mites live in the plant?
They live
Not
in
in the
the-
soil or anything?
no, they
Okay.
live inside the plant. And one of the things, when we used a landscaping service to help with all this, they said, make sure you do not leave even one root in the ground, because those roses.
Jeez.
Well, that's, yeah,
That's hard.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's why we paid them to do that, because
Well, if we have that in our garden, that might turn into a tomato garden instead of roses.
but if we don't remain in him, then disease can attack, and we become useless. They carted away all that stuff that they dug up, and it was kind of sad. The money that we had, it was very sad, the money that we had to put back in there to get those replaced, but I didn't have a choice. I did have a choice.
You could put gravel in.
I could have put gravel in or concrete, but,
Painted green.
and painted green.
And there's no disease in gravel.
And there is no diseased gravel, that is true. But if we don't remain in him, we're about as useful as those roses that got sick last year.
But the other picture you showed us of the pile,
Of sticks.
yeah, could be firewood and live again.
True.
But that's off metaphor.
That's,
Sorry.
that's screaming plants and a stick of wood. I
Yes, it can still be
don't
useful.
wanna look and grow and be absolutely fruitless and be worth digging up and throwing away. That's what I want to be in him. Such fruit. My new ones aren't this big, okay? But if people came in your yard, they would be, I'm sorry, I'm going overboard on flower analogies. But if people walked into your yard, are they going to be drawn to something like that? Or drawn to something like that? I want to have the kind of fruit that people are drawn to me because I look like something that's a little different. I don't want to look like that. So, part of the thing to walk away from today is, which one are we looking like? And now I'll be just as honest. There are days that I look like that. I see some kind of smiles around. Yes, if we're being truthful with ourselves, we look like that. But I want to have more days that I look like that and demonstrate the fruit that he wants to do in me. I don't do the fruit. He does the fruit. Okay. Now look at this. This is from 1 John, all the way over, not the book of John. He says, if you remain in me and my words remain in you. Does this not sound familiar? Ask whatever you wish. Wait, look, no, sorry, if I got that. 1 John 5:14 sounds so similar. Thea, would you read that for us? Because after I got my, no. That's such a
5:14.
yeah.
And we are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for.
If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. Why? This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Evidently, when John wrote the book of John, and then the amount of, I thought it would have been, because I was thinking Jesus was, 30 AD. So that was written in 30 AD, John, which was wrong. I started looking up dates and I thought, well, that's not right. 1 John 5:14, John was most likely on the Isle of Patmos. And between he wrote the book of John and when he wrote that, could have been about 10 to 15 years difference between the two. But the same thought that was so important when Jesus said it, John circles around, 10, 15 years later and says, I need to say this again. Now, fruit, continuously bearing of fruit, not just one time bearing. I don't remember what it was, but last year it was blooming, whatever it was, so pretty at Lowe's, and I thought, oh, I like that. It's low, da-da-da. I didn't read enough. Do you know how many times it bloomed? Once during the spring, summer, and fall. Just one time, then it looked ugly. It was just a little bushy
One of
thing.
those things that we have to tear it up. That did that. They bloom early, and then they're done.
Oh, our
We-
azaleas?
Yeah, the azaleas. Yeah.
Well, they're not supposed to do that, but
Oh, well.
But yeah, this was an aging plant, and I thought, I wanted it to bear fruit the whole time. He wants us to bear fruit continuously. Now I title this thing, that pesky promise. Ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. Boy, that's a pesky promise. Because what is it, think about the prior verse, what is it predicated on? That we have to be,
With him, dwelling with him.
we have to be remaining in him. So if we were remaining in him, what are we gonna pray for? How's that
His
gonna,
will.
huh?
His will
Gonna pray for his will
to us.
to us. I'll be honest, Julie, that's a powerful thing you're doing when you walk around that bus and pray.
Mhm.
That's a prayer, I think, that delights God to hear. But if we had to sit down and look at our prayer life for, I don't know, the last 6 months, how much of it, I think he hears everything, but I think sometimes our requests reflect when we're really remaining in him, and also reflect when we're not remaining in him so much.
The content of the prayer probably shifts a little bit depending on where you're at in that. By that I mean, if you're not remaining in him, your concerns may tend to be consistently more selfish in nature. I need this, help me with this, me.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, what would you have me do? Help me see the things that you care about.
Right.
Give me
I
right
asked
motives.
Katie, well, what happens if I do this prayer and something happens? Sometimes things happen. And she said that's where your faith comes in. You trust God that everything's going to be okay.
Or
Walk
you
in faith.
trust God that he's gonna walk with you whatever happens.
Mhm.
The definition of okay is spiritually okay.
Spiritually okay, yeah, spiritually okay. That he is not going to take you where he's not gonna be with you.
Mhm.
Look at the logic of this. If we remain in him, we're gonna bear much fruit. We're gonna demonstrate that we are his disciples. Fruitless Christians don't demonstrate that they are his disciples. It's just not possible. You can't, fruitless, it's kinda useless. I'm not saying we're not saved, but, pardon? Tell me the look. Can
If
a,
you're not bearing fruit, are you a Christian?
well, that's one of the, that's a good question. Are you? Could a person be a believer but not be producing fruit?
It's, I think, seasons. I would say that it comes down to seasons. If you never bear fruit, I would say no. But I think that there are seasons where there's some pruning going on. If you bear fruit after a pruning, then sure.
Right. So
Well-
God could be working in those.
One of the fundamental doctrines of the Baptist Church is once you're saved, you're always saved. It's not a work.
Right.
And so if you're failing to do works, or if you're still a Christian, you're just not a good one.
You're not bearing much fruit.
Not bearing much fruit.
And it's not ours to judge that. That's the, now there are other denominations that reject that doctrine.
Oh, I mean, I agree, once saved, always saved, but I think that we have a history of, somebody comes forward on a Sunday morning and then gets dumped 3 weeks later, and the assumption is that they're a Christian now, but they never bear any fruit, ever. Were they in the first place? I don't think it's our place to judge either, necessarily. I think that if they want to have responsibility, you want to be a Sunday school teacher, deacon, whatever, I think, you should be producing fruit if you're asking for responsibility and leadership. But I think we have, especially, I would say, probably starting late 80s, early 90s, when it was, the kind of seeker-sensitive church movement. And it's like, you walk down the aisle, bing, you're done. And there was never, and I think it's still the case, there was never to extend the gardening metaphor. There was no fertilizer added. There was no water. There was no one watching to make sure that there were buds of growth. You like that?
I like that, yeah.
metaphor, right? And so I think that's where, as a big C church, to some extent little C, Lake Shore Church, are the people that are already in the garden and growing, are we making sure that all the new plants added to the garden are also growing and healthy and supporting them?
Discipleship.
Yes.
Are we the tomato cages? Are we being good tomato cages?
Ooh,
Tomato cages, that's good.
That was good right there.
that is good right
Every now
there.
and then.
Well,
Come up with
Jesus
something.
started the metaphor.
Jesus
I know,
started, it's
I
all,
know.
it's
All
it's
Jesus.
Yeah, we don't buy your tomato cages at Home Depot because they were lousy. One already broke when we were putting it in. Moving on. So, y'all are so much fun to teach this lesson today. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. Remain in the vine. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. Look at the kind of the logic with that. The Father's love for Jesus. Jesus' love for the disciples. Now because of that, you remain, I have loved you. You remain in my love, abide in the vine. Obedience demonstrates that we are remaining in His love. We are not obedient in everything. If somebody says they've got it down perfect, I don't believe them. They're not viewing themselves. But you know, kind of a movement toward being more obedient. Do you know that our focus is wanting to be obedient? We're still gonna mess up, but there is growth. Those, back to Thea's metaphor, those buds of obedience kind of keep increasing in our life. That's part of remaining in His love, that we want to be obedient to what He says to us. Now, I put this in caps. So, what's the purpose for telling them? See, look, He's just told them this about God loves me, I love you, remain in my love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Complete, permanent joy apart from Christ. See, we miss happiness and joy. Complete, permanent happiness. I think happiness is transitory. Anybody, feel free to jump in with that. I can be happy. I can be happy about a lot of stuff. That happiness, I may be happy today about the meal we had last night. My happiness does not persist if the next meal is lousy. I'm not going to sit there thinking, oh, but the meal yesterday was great. So it's okay, you know, it varies. But joy should stand the test of time no matter what are the circumstances swirling around us. I'm not there yet, okay? I'm not, depending on the circumstances. I have not gotten to the point where I can remain joyful no matter what happens. But He says your joy will be made complete. Julie mentioned, I'm not picking on you today, but Julie mentioned, you know, faith. What Katie said was faith and that God's hand is right here. Now,
What about being thankful for a situation that you've gone through that is really difficult, and then you're on the other side of it? There are several of those in my life where I feel stronger or closer because of the experience of the suffering, the fear.
isn't it good to be able to look back and see His hand in all that, what He tried to do? Because probably it's going to come around again. And how our mind can go back and say, He was faithful. I don't want it to. He was faithful then. Look where I am now. He's going to be faithful. His faithfulness is not going to change. So in case you didn't get this, I'm going to tell you one more time. My command is this. Love each other as I have loved you. You're going to have to love each other. Now, there's a bunch here. I'm just going to read it real fast. This is from the book of 1 John. See, that whole thing of loving each other. We know that we have come to know Him if we keep His commands. I think Jesus just said something about that. Whoever says, I know Him, but does not do what He commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys His word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are, we are in Him. Whoever claims to live in Him must live as Jesus did. Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one, which you've had since the beginning. This old command is the message you have heard. Yet I'm writing to you a new command. Its truth is seen in Him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in darkness. He said you can't hate a brother or sister. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there's nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates a brother and sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded him. The importance of this from God's perspective, this was so important, I wanted John to tell it again. How similar, I had never thought quite how similar John's writing is. I don't know why I was surprised. Between the important things Jesus taught them, John was compelled by the Spirit to write them down another time in case we didn't get it the first time. I'm glad he tells us more than once. So here, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Jesus' death on the cross, this isn't my sentence, okay, was the pinnacle of demonstration of God's love for us. Then I turned it in practicality. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The pinnacle of a loving relationship is sacrificial. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross was he could not demonstrate God's love for us anymore. A couple of weeks ago we talked about how the cross was coming. It was midnight or 2 or 3 in the morning as Jesus was approaching the cross. And we talked about how frightening it must have been. But he still followed the Father's will up onto that cross. Being willing to lay down one's life for one's friends. I've got kind of a limited number of people I would die for without a thought. There might be others I'd want to think about it for a while. You know, but that kind of love, if we're willing to die for someone, that's self-sacrificing. That's saying, I'm willing to say, you are more important than me if I'm willing to die. That's what Jesus did. The will of the Father is more important than the will of the Son. So, you're my friends. I suppose they're not servants anymore. If you do what I command, ongoing action, not just one time obey to get a prize. Boy, have y'all seen kids do that.
He's over there today.
Pardon?
I go, he's over there today.
Okay.
Grandson.
Oh, man.
He was very difficult.
Yeah, he is.
Was he having a tough day?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So did you bribe him?
Well, no, but when they got in there, Callie took him in too, but he was a little bear, and then the Sunday school teacher goes, oh, you have prizes and treat or
Oh, so the Sunday school
snacks."
teacher bribed
The
him.
Sunday school teacher did the
And then he was okay.
You know,
It's different when somebody else bribes instead of family.
Must be.
that is true. But he's looking for obedience as an ongoing action, again, not just one time obey to get a prize. Have y'all seen that ad on TV that's for, you paid somebody or something to lose weight? Have y'all seen that? It's like you give some company $100 and you evidently set what you want to, or I don't know if it's a specified amount. You set what you want to lose, and then at the end when you achieve your goal, you get the money back, but it's earned interest or something. You know, the motivation is the prize. When you get the money back, then is your motivation, is your motivation gone? He said, I no longer call you a servant, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends, for everything I've learned from my Father, I've told you about it now. The relationship has changed between when those disciples were first called and where they are right now. Jesus, and I put the comment, Jesus is giving the Father's words to them. They are friends, but remember, that doesn't mean they're equal to Jesus. You know, if we're equal to Jesus, then that's like we've just elevated ourselves to God's, you know. but the relationship has changed. When you get adult children, the relationship should change to when they were younger children. You know, you can't tell them what to do anymore.
You can try, but.
Am I getting a look? I try not to do that.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
I see my tongue lying on the floor when I've bitten it. Yes, I do, y'all.
I'm gonna let her live in that alternate reality.
Okay. Well, next time I'm doing that, you alert me that when I'm doing it.
See how that goes.
But I should be, because I should be respectful and hear that. You got the word should. I can't promise, but I should be.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, I should, because the relationship has changed as opposed to when they were 12 and there were no choices or very few choices at 12.
She was right on the first date, but there were no choices.
There were no choices because my job was to protect and teach and do all that stuff we want to get done by the time they're 12, because before they lose their mind at 13. She never lost her mind at 13. I will
Right.
be on. Okay, so now as we wrap it up, which kind of pruners do you need that I need at this point? Do you know what the pruners on the left are called? There is a name for them.
A lopper.
A lopper.
I just use a chainsaw.
Okay.
Great word.
I should have just put 3 pictures in, a pruner or a lopper or a chain. You put in pictures of loppers and they are everywhere. But where are we at, right? Pardon?
Nothing.
Loppers, you can find loppers, they even tell me how much they cost at Lowe's. Where are we now in our life? Are we at the clipper stage pruner, or do we at the point where we need a lopper? And I'm not saying it's, that lopper can accomplish a lot in us, okay? It would be great to see we only need the clippers, that we only need Jesus to do clippers in our life. But I am being honest, there are times when I feel he must shake his head and say, Tracy, I'm gonna get out the lopper on you, because you have got to work on X, because it's not bearing fruit and it can cause a problem in your life. So maybe that's where the thought you kinda wanna the takeaway today is, which one do you need? And how do you go from needing a lopper to needing a clipper? And maybe that looks at how much are we abiding in him. So for those who are out there watching, you may wanna go and look at your yard today and see if you need clippers or if you need loppers. But thank y'all for watching.
Or a shovel.
Or a shovel, just